I was hoping you would share first a bit about your background, and you can feel free to go back as far as you wish. Uh, I love to hear how, paths diverge from what you're doing now, where you started. So was
Yeah,
this always an interest or path?
I think it was, but like all these things, it's not until you get older that all the parts seem to connect with each other. And so I've been very fortunate. I've been brought up in a family of women, and we had this sort of Roman Catholic side, the Maltese side, and then we had the very British side, which is my mum. And my mum has always been very spiritual. I think she was absolutely ahead of the game, you know, way back when. And as a result, I've had that influence. I've always had that curiosity to want to find out more. And even though I was brought up in a very sort of standard, going to school and learning about the church and things like that, I got to a point where, certainly when I went to college and I studied classics at college, that I was like, everything that I thought I knew, I didn't know. And it was a bit, it was, there was almost a form of grief. I felt like when I was looking at the archaic religions, and I was looking at Isis, and I was looking at all these different stories, I was thinking, now, hang on a minute, these are very similar to the stories that I was brought up with. How can this be true? How can this be true? And I just had a fascination with ancient Rome and Greece and the gods and the goddesses and things like that, and how human they were and how spiteful they were and all of these different things. And then obviously we have the other side of it, where I was going to church with my godparents, and the ritualistic side of things. And I think that's something I'm really conscious of whenever I talk about the things that I do talk about. It's not to slight anybody's beliefs. I think if you have a belief and it gives you comfort, absolutely do that. Always do what feels right for you. For me, it's exploring and having that curiosity to say, well, how does this work? And how does this work? And I think I've always had that in my mind. I've explored, witchcraft and spells and myths. And I love magic. I love anything to, any programs to do with magic. I'm there. I've got ridiculous amounts of books because I'm just fascinated with it. Because I do feel now, whether this is just my intuition or whether this is something made up in a childlike brain, I don't know. But I do believe in that sense of power and magic that we have. I do believe that we have these abilities that have been suppressed in some way, shape, or form, whether that's been suppressed by the environments that we've been living in, or whether we've suppressed it ourselves in our evolution. But I think that for me is really interesting. And with my work, I've always worked with people. I've always worked with people for people. It lights me up. It gives me purpose to know that I'm supporting other people to be the best that they can possibly be. And I think in that sense, it tended towards the corporate, working within organizations and working really broadly with organizations, but it was always the individual, working with the individual, whether through coaching them or through delivery of training, and and that's even the sort of corporate side of leadership development and leadership training, where we look at different standards and different models of how people can work, but trying to feed in the human consciousness within everything that I do. And as you might appreciate, when you're working in the corporate world, you can't necessarily be spiritual, and you have to be quite science based, evidence based. So yeah, I love that. I agree with that. But what I find fascinating now is how science is catching up with all of our, what our ancestors intuitively knew, and now the science is confirming it. And that for me is like, aha,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
just
it's exciting.
wonderful. So when I see something that resonates in that way, I'm just like, this is beautiful. People intuitively knew this centuries ago. Science is now confirming it. And that for me is just wonderful. Wonderful.